Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind him. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way. At the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio is at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty.
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome in to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's Anthony Pagnotta back with you guys after the first week of the college football season, the first week that the Tar Heels were back on the field, and it wasn't quite as comfortable as we would have thought early on, but Carolina pulled away, ended up actually covering the spread with a 31-6 victory over the Syracuse Orange in Kenan Stadium, an empty Kenan Stadium that was a weird environment. We thought it could take these guys some time to settle in. It definitely did, but once this team settled in, they looked much better in the second half against a Syracuse team that they probably should have beaten pretty handedly.
Yeah, it was an ugly first half to say the least. I guess you could expect that would be in the first game of the season and all that, but Carolina didn't look as sharp as we thought they were going to look early on. The offense never got into rhythm. The defense from the first quarter through the fourth quarter was consistently making plays and whatnot, but that fourth quarter, I think that's the thing, the difference between this team and a couple of other teams in the past. They're better at finishing games under Mack Brown, under Brian Hess as the strength and conditioning coach than they ever were under Larry Fedora. They were more fresh in the fourth quarter. That's why the running game finally got going. They got bigger push up front. They'll open up the running room for Javonte Williams to get in the end zone 3 touchdowns. But Mack Brown said something after the game that really caught my attention. He said that we saw the chance that we can be pretty good. And we know this team can be pretty good, but they've got to learn to play to a standard for 60 minutes. You're not going to win a lot of games only playing the fourth quarter like they did on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that was pretty well said by the head coach of the Tar Heels because, that first half was pretty rough, especially on the offensive line. Of course, you did your trench report. I know a lot of people were really very critical of the offensive line. Did you think that they deserved the criticism that they received to start that game?
I mean, once we found out that Izuda wasn't going to play, I think our whole expectation for how that position group was going to play changed, but it still wasn't very encouraging. We had to put a junior walk-on player on, and that actually lifted your play. No disrespect to Kerryon Johnson, but guys that you have scholarships that you've recruited and that that you think you're a lot more comfortable than being on the field weren't getting the job done. Then in the second half, a lot of it was maybe just because Syracuse was tired, and they were able to just push them around a little bit more. But untimely penalties. Brian Anderson had a big holding penalty on a big run play in the first quarter that killed a drive. Yep. So they have a lot of stuff to clean up, and we've talked a lot since Saturday before we got on here. When Mack Brown hired Stacey Searles, there was a lot of mixed reviews about the hire.
Right.
And I think you're starting to see why, because this offensive line, even though it was only one game, they didn't look as crisp as they needed to look on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely got to be some concern, especially on the left side of that line where you just saw multiple times where it looked like miscommunication between both Richards and Montilus. It's really concerning to me that Montilus was as bad as he was because, remember, Ed Montilus was a guy that started 7 games a year ago. And now, we saw him on Saturday. He looked like a guy that's never started a game in his career. It was a completely different player than even a year ago, where pretty much the reason he was taken out of the lineup a year ago was that he couldn't pass protect. Ezeudu could, and that was pretty much the reason that they went with Ezeudu over him. Now, this looks like, that first game, and again, it's the first game. It's been a long and confusing summer, unlike any other. But you get replaced, as you mentioned, by Kieran Johnson, who I thought did a fantastic job playing, above what he should normally be playing at. That was not a situation that he was probably prepared for. But he came in and played very well, about as well as you could have hoped for him to play, and really energized this offensive line. I mean, I kind of compared it to when Roy Williams kind of sends in some of the blue squad guys to try to get guys going. Stillman White a couple years ago. Remember Robbie O'Han, he did that last year in the game against Georgia Tech. It had a very similar type of feel. And that's, I think, the biggest concern going forward for Carolina, especially, when you get into ACC play, that early part of the schedule in ACC play where you've got Boston College who rushes the passer well every year. You've got Virginia Tech who rushes the passer well every year. And I don't think you can wait every week until the fourth quarter to get yourself going through the air.
You can't.
And
They're not good enough to wait till the fourth quarter to turn it on.
Yeah, you can win games against Syracuse like that. You can probably win games, later in the year against Wake Forest and maybe NC State like that. You don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to have a comfortable lead at halftime and sort of cruise down the stretch. And I mean, it's weird to be talking about this in a 25-point victory where we saw pretty much all of the offensive backups. But, I mean, you feel like Carolina could have made a little bit of a stronger statement in this game. I still think it's a good win. It's the first game of the season, so I'm not overly concerned. But at the same time, I'm not on the train that I think Carolina right now is exactly what we were expecting to see from them coming out of the gate.
No, this team still, they have a lot of work to do if they want to be legitimate contenders to compete for the ACC championship game. Your defense gave up 6 points, and you were only up 4 going in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Your defense is not going to give you this week in, week out.
You wouldn't think. I think they have potential to be much better than any year prior.
They're not going to be shut down week in, week out.
Right.
You're not going to give up 200 yards every week.
No, that's definitely, and if we do, then we should probably be on the precipice of the college football playoff, considering the offensive talent that we have on this football.
So the defense kept them in the game because they gave Syracuse a lot of manageable field positions at times with the turnovers and stuff like that, to where if Syracuse could have put a couple of drives together, they could have actually been leading that game going in the fourth quarter. The defense stood up. That's not going to happen every week. It's just not. You need to be able to put points up early and often, and they weren't able to. But it's the first game. A lot of this overreaction is just the fact that I haven't had a lot to complain about for 6 months, and now I have something to complain about. And I was pissed off I thought the game plan was bad for the first 3 quarters. I didn't understand. We came on here talking about how Carolina's going to establish the run, and they came out air raid that first quarter.
Well, and they couldn't establish the run either when they did try to establish the run, because as you mentioned, you had the long run from Michael Carter that gets called back, and then after that, they just couldn't seem to find any sort of running lanes at all. Pretty much the only time they were gaining yards is if Javonte Williams was just powering his way through guys. So again, I mean, I don't know, how much of the game plan was altered due to what they saw from the offensive line. I'm not really sure, but I'm kind of with you. I think that they need to establish the run more often early on. Allow that to open up your passing game, because this year, unlike in prior years, you're going to see a lot more teams double-teaming guys like Daz Newsome, De'Ami Brown, trying to make, somebody else make a play. Your running game, even when they do load the box against you, if you have good enough run blocking, you can still run the football. And I think that's what they've got to do going forward. I think the other big concern that a lot of people had, and legitimately so, was the special teams unit. You had Grayson Atkins, who wasn't bad, made a 31-yard field goal, made all 4 of his extra point attempts, but missed from 50. Again, we're not going to really, roast a guy for missing from 50, but this is a little bit concerning, because this is kind of why he was brought in, was because he was a guy that could make long field goals. You were hoping that he would be able to extend your range. I'm not saying that there's a lot of concern yet for him, but I think it's definitely something to note. And then don't even get me started on the punt coverage unit, which was just atrocious.
I think, and this is me just standard football-wise, once you get inside the 40, unless it's 4th and 5 or 6 or longer, my mind says we're going to go for it and live with the results. I think that's what Carolina should be comfortable at 4th and 4 from the 38 or the 33 going for instead of settling for 3 points.
Well, you'd like to have a kicker that you wouldn't have to worry about that. So you can put up as many points as you want.
I would just rather say just stay aggressive. Unless it's like a one-possession game, we need those 3 points. I would just say we're going for it. Once we get inside the 40-yard line, if it's 4th and manageable, my offense is going for it.
Well, that's the problem with him missing the 50-yard field goal. At the time, also, you were still in a close game. You were in a game where you hadn't played well. You thought to yourself, okay, points seem to be at a premium here because both defenses are playing very well. That's where I'm concerned, because that's the thing. There are going to be close games later in the year where you're going to have to make a field goal from 45 yards or further.
Yep.
And you've got to be able to make those because, look, we've seen it before. I don't think Noah Ruggles is a guy that's making those deep kicks. So Grayson Atkins has to be that guy. Again, he wasn't bad, but you would like to at least see as the year goes along some of those, 45, 50-yarders find their way through the uprights. Punt coverage, look, if they don't get the punt called or the return called back on the block on Kiernan, I thought he looked fine. He punted very well. Averaged 45.5 yards per punt. He's fine. The coverage unit, which we heard was they were hoping was going to be better because of the added speed, everything like that. They looked a step behind, and hopefully that's something that they can get corrected the next time that we see them. I understand, and it's a legitimate argument that they don't really practice special teams as much as they practice the offensive and defensive side of the football in practice. Makes sense, but at the same time, as you talked about, your defense is not always going to be able to give you the type of performance that they had in this game to open the season. You're going to get beat up. You're going to have guys that are going to be injured. There's going to be times where teams can move the football on you. Your special teams unit has to be able to help out your defense by giving them a field to protect.
No. And luckily for us, they called the penalty on the punt return because that wasn't a block in the back. That should have been a touchdown.
Was it a block in the back or was it a blindside block?
No, it was blindside block, and
which again
it was a bad call.
So confusing. It makes no sense. The rule basically, if you don't see the guy, then it's apparently a blindside block. I don't really understand that rule.
So they got bailed out by ACC refs, but. Mac Brown fired.
It'll come back. Well, okay. Later in the game, your quarterback gets hit helmet to helmet by a guy that leans down with his shoulder and purposely hits him in the head, and they didn't call it. So the ACC refs always find a way to make it up. Again, something that you probably shouldn't be complaining too much about, but when they're saying they want to protect players' safety in terms of everything that's gone on with concussions, that one just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The last thing I guess that we'll talk about cleaning up wise, I think, this is the first time in a while. I thought towards the end of last year they got it fixed. First time in a while that we saw real concerns with the penalties, 9 for 91. Really a majority of that was in the first half, so I'm not really overly concerned about that as the season goes along. I also think that more than likely we're probably going to see more penalties called this year because you don't have the home crowd that could play a factor in it. You don't have, there's a chance to focus on more stuff, I guess, as referees, but I think it's still an area that you got to be observant of, and I think Mac Brown probably has been talking about that a lot this week and as we go into the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, 9 for 91. That'll kill you a lot of weeks. They were able to overcome it because they were playing an inferior opponent
and a team that took 8 penalties themselves. That's not going to happen every week.
It didn't hurt that you were playing an opponent that wasn't as mentally smart as you were on Saturday either, but. That's the part of them getting better that Mac Brown is stressing. It's not just always the execution of plays on offense and defense. It's the bad penalties that kill you. That holding on Brian Anderson, that game could have been different if that penalty had not occurred because that was going to be first and goal from like the 2-yard line. You're probably going to score a touchdown. You'd imagine. How does the game go from there? You don't know because you held. So. They got to play smarter, but first time out there, real game situation. You weren't playing against yourself. It was expected. It's something that we'll have to monitor though when they get back on the field through the rest of the season.
Yeah, and look, it wasn't all negative. I mean, the way we've been talking, we sound like we lost the game. We won by 25. I think the first thing when you talk about the positives, the running game for Carolina really got going late in the game. It wasn't as productive as they probably would have liked early on, but once that offensive line settled in, you had the tandem of Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, who had big days. Javonte Williams, 3 touchdowns in the game, all of them coming in the fourth quarter, and those were his only 3 carries of the fourth quarter, so very efficient for Javonte Williams. And you got both him and Michael Carter, but hey, Javonte Williams is our offensive player of the game this week on the Heel Tough Blog podcast after just a sensational performance.
Yeah, I mean, he was just able to run over opponents. Pretty much what we've come accustomed to the healthy version of Javonte Williams. Michael Carter, to me, looked faster on Saturday. He was able to get the corner, get the edge.
Agree. More decisive as well, I thought.
Whenever he found his hole and he attacked it, you saw the speed to get long runs. That's kind of been the complaint about him, is he was never able to break off long runs. He had the one, of course, that got held, and he had 7 carries for 78 yards. So, you're averaging 11 yards a pop. That's really good. So the running game in that second half was a lot better once the offensive line was more settled in. You wore down the Syracuse front. And I think that might be Carolina's game plan, is maybe they're going to be pass heavy early on because you've got Sam Howell and all those targets. In the second half and in that fourth quarter, they're going to be tired, and you can just line up and shove the ball down their throat. And I'm okay with that as long as it gets you winning results.
Well, the thing is that has to be the game plan when you're winning games. When you're losing games, you can't run the ball as often because you're going to be taking time off the clock. So, they've got to kind of manage that. That's why I think you still have to run the ball early against some of these opponents once your offensive line can sort of get settled down and get out of the gate a heck of a lot quicker than they did this past week. You mentioned Michael Carter, not only 78 yards on the ground, 60 yards receiving as well. Very good day for him. After, of course, last year having over 1,000 rushing yards, 1,000 all-purpose yards. So you're expecting another season like that from him. He also looks like he may even be a bigger part of this passing offense here this year, especially if the offensive line still continues to struggle and they have to get the ball out quickly. Wide receiving-wise, I think Carolina looked pretty strong as well, along with quarterback Sam Howell. He threw 2 interceptions. The first one I didn't really think was that his fault. I know somebody was saying that, he put it into a tight window. That's his own fault that it got intercepted. No, that's how football works. Quarterbacks are supposed to fit balls into tight windows. The thing is if a guy comes up and just makes a good defensive play, like the Syracuse corner did, deflecting the ball, and it was eventually intercepted, there's really nothing you can do in that situation. It's okay to say, okay, we got beat by a guy that just made a play on that one. I thought the second interception, a little more concerning, but he bounced back from that really in that second half, late in that third quarter into the fourth quarter when he was in the game. He looked perfectly fine, looked like the Sam Howell that we knew. He made the throws when he needed to, and I still think, some people, and this is going to be what we're going to be monitoring pretty much all year, some people say, well, you struggled a little bit against Syracuse. That probably means that you still have you have absolutely no shot to win the Heisman. If you're still, one of those people that is holding out hope that Sam can win the Heisman, like we are as well, I don't think this is something to be overly concerned about.
No, the 2 interceptions aren't off to a good start. We went through 7 last year. The one, not your fault. The defensive back made a play. The second interception looked like something that Trevor Lawrence did last year. He just wasn't seeing the field early on in the season.
Right.
Sam Howell's going to have those where he's just going to he's not going to make the right decision all the time. That was that interception there. But he was 25 of 34 for 295 and a touchdown, 2 picks.
Yeah, that's pretty solid numbers.
You take away the 2 interceptions.
Take away 1 interception.
You're not feeling bad about his performance.
Yeah.
So the passing game is not going to be a problem as long as protection holds up. They're going to get the ball out to their guys, and they're going to make plays.
And he's developing even more targets. Your guy that you were pointing out on the podcast last week, Garrett Walston, good game for him, ends up catching the opening touchdown. Joffrey Brown looks like he can be a significant part of this wide receiving core this year. And then you combine it with all 3 of your major guys. The guy that had the worst day was Daz Newsome. He only caught 2 passes for 25 yards. But your other 2 guys that you were used to throwing to a year ago had big days. De'Ami Brown, 6 catches, 94 yards, which I don't know about you. Kind of snuck up on me. He had a big catch, of course, late in the game. He had that 38-yarder on one of the fourth quarter drives. But I thought he had a pretty good day as well with the targets that he did see. And same thing with Bo Corrales. He had 5 catches for 47 yards. So you feel very comfortable with this group that Carolina has right now. The depth is already starting to show on this offensive side of the ball. I think, if you can get that offensive line shored up, which we've talked about so much, I think you're going to have a chance to have a lot of success. When you move to the defensive side of the ball, I mean, look, the statistics are crazy. I mean, they let up 202 yards, the least amount of yards they've let up in a game since the Butch Davis era. I mean, everybody that could have played well, played well. Carolina's linebacking core was phenomenal, led by Chaz Surratt, who is our defensive player of the week. 9 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits. He was everywhere. And also a guy that we wanted to see take another step forward this year. He did that to start out of the gate, was Jeremiah Gemmel. I thought he looked fantastic as well.
Yeah, the linebacking core looked as good as they've looked under Jay Bateman in this scheme. They were everywhere. They were making plays in space or not in space whenever the defensive line allowed them to get to the ball and make plays in the run game. So it was a very encouraging effort from this defense. You're not going to give up 202 yards a game week in, week out.
Yeah.
But you had a lot of questions up front about how this team would perform. Now, granted, Syracuse had a lot of questions on their offensive line, but they were still able to be disruptive and give Tommy DeVito hell for 60 minutes, and you allowed the back end of your defense, where you know your back seven is going to be good, to make plays all night long, so they were able to do that. We'll move to I'll move to the defensive line. I thought the defensive line, you look at Tamari Fox had a lot of plays.
Yep.
Timon Fox was in there. Raymond Velasic was a force up front at times.
Didn't make a lot of tackles, but you could see his presence was there.
You knew he was there, whether he was in the backfield or not. He was causing. He was basically a cause and effect. The cause of him being in the backfield allowed other guys to come up and make plays.
Definitely.
And when he wasn't,
he
was still being disruptive up there. So that's the thing that Carolina's got to do right now when you're in the easy part of your schedule is you got to get confidence these guys, they can make plays when they get up against the bigger opponents. They got to make plays, in big situations. Those guys did it on Saturday.
Well, their front seven was part of a group that finished with 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. I know that Syracuse's offensive line was kind of in flux, but that's still pretty impressive for a Carolina team that's really struggled to get after the passer sometimes here in recent memory. But, I'm telling you, this group looks stacked. I mean, you got a guy in Kamen Rucker, came in, finished with 5 tackles in his first game. He was a rotational player, only played 22 snaps and had 5 tackles. That's really good for a guy that was ranked outside of the top 1,000 recruits in this past recruiting class, coming in as a true freshman, having a big impact. At the back end, some mix-ups. You saw a couple of times Trey Morrison got out of position, got beat. There were a couple other plays early on in the game where they got beat, but they really settled in nicely, and I think it all starts and ends with the guy that we knew was going to be a standout on this defense this year, and that was Storm Duck, who I thought was fantastic on Saturday.
Yeah, no, he was the one guy that didn't look like he missed a beat at all from last season to this season.
I think he got better.
Yeah,
he was all over it.
Faster, stronger, making plays. Trey Morrison, of course, got beat a few times. Patrice Renee got beat a few times, but once the defensive line was able to consistently get to DeVito, and DeVito was only 13 of 31.
Right.
It just, that's the thing. When your front seven or even your front three are making plays, it makes it easier for your back end guys to maybe take some chances and make plays, and they did that. And it was a very good step. There's no questions or there's no worries about that position group, not with the amount of talent. And there's still, even with the guys that decided to sit out because of COVID, there's still some depth there. You're not worried about those guys at all going into this year. I thought Don Chapman had a good game as well.
You got there.
Yeah, that's my guy for
Tyler
tackles.
McMichael, I thought, looked pretty good, too. He was, I was shocked how many snaps he got over Patrice Renee. I mean, Patrice took 15 snaps the whole game. Somebody kind of asked me, why do you think that is? Pretty much I just told them, I think it mainly is because Kyler McMichael just played that well in this game. So very encouraged with what we saw from the defensive side of the football. I would say, if you can kind of hold opponents consistently around 300 yards or less in games, I think you feel very comfortable with where your defense is. I mean, especially if you can even duplicate the way that you were able to slow down their run game 3 or 4 times throughout the year in big moments when you're playing playing these teams that can run the football well, especially, late in the season when you're going to play Notre Dame and Miami. If that run defense can show up, you're going to have a really good chance to be very, very good, because you trust that your offense, even though they maybe had some stumbles out of the gate, they're going to find their footing, and the way that you played in this game is just very encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make teams one-dimensional with the way your back seven is capable of playing, you're going to be pretty tough to beat week in, week out.
Unfortunately, we are not going to get to see them this week. That news came down this morning that Carolina will not be able to play in the game against Charlotte. The way it is explained as of right now from the Charlotte Observer, multiple sources around the area as well, is that they did have a positive case. Some think it's one. Another group says that it's three. We're not entirely sure.
They've
on the
had
exact
three within
number.
the last 2 weeks.
So there you go. So I think one, as of right now, is still testing positive, but due to contact tracing, they've gone back. They've gone through all the guys that have been in contact with this person. Pretty much the entire offensive line unit wouldn't be able to play in this game, and you can't play without an offensive line. So unfortunately, that game has been canceled. As of right now, it appears there is no way that they will be able to reschedule that unless something drastic changes. That's what we expect. So, definitely disappointing for Carolina in a game where you felt like they were going to have a chance to once again get out, some of those early season jitters and potentially be able to get a look at some of the depth pieces once again.
Yeah, this was a game that really you were wanting to have, because you had your first game, then you have this game, then you're resting, then you're all in ACC play. This was your last chance to really work on things that you need to work on before you're in a full-blown conference slate. So now you've lost that opportunity. They have said they're going to try to find an opponent for September 26th. Don't know how easy that's going to be for them with it just being just over a week away. But, it really sucks because the relationship Mac Brown and Will Healy had, they're really good friends. He's been mentor to him since he got into the coaching profession. There's a lot of belief that Will Healy could be the next guy in Chapel Hill once Mac Brown eventually retires. They're in-state opponents, so you're wanting to kind of help the little guy out and all that stuff, so that kind of sucks as well. But, this is part of it. We knew playing football during this pandemic was going to happen week in, week out. We've seen it with Major League Baseball. It hasn't been happening in the NBA and the NHL. They're in bubbles. These aren't, they have their form of bubbles, but they're not in an enclosed environment. This is going to be a part of it. And, it sucks, but hopefully sometime down the road we'll get to play Charlotte again.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have them somewhere on the schedule here in the near future.
Because I love getting bye wins over in-state opponents like Duke, State, and Charlotte.
This felt like it was going to be one of those games, too, because you were going to be going up against a transfer quarterback who never played at the FBS level. It was definitely a significant step up for Charlotte, even from last week. You thought your run game would be able to get going against a team that allowed 308 yards on the ground last week. But unfortunately, everything is going to be put on hold. As for the opportunity next week, I think they're going to search hard. There was an article that was released, I think it was last night, kind of detailing how Baylor and Houston pretty much did a similar thing, getting a game scheduled 10 days in advance. That's part of what you're going to have to be prepared for this year. So I fully expect that Carolina is going to look for another game. One of the opponents that somebody said they know is free is Clemson. I would like to avoid that at all costs. That would not be a good team to play after having your struggles a little bit against the Syracuse defensive line. I don't think the offensive line would want to see Clemson rolling into town. But, I think they're going to do everything that they can to try to get another game on the schedule, whether it's here, whether it's later in the season. I know they have another bye. Maybe they possibly try to fit it in there if they have some chance. But I think the biggest thing and the one that's the most concerning for me is I don't know if this team, after getting themselves in season mode, is now ready to take time off. Which, you got to think, if there's not a game played next week, they're going to go almost 3 weeks without playing a game.
Yep.
I don't know how I feel about that in terms of carrying momentum over, building on some of the stuff that you did in that first game. It feels like you would almost be completely restarting.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm with you. I think they're going to push really, really hard to find a game to play the 26th. I think that bye week that you have in November, you want to save that bye because that's the game in between, right before you play Notre Dame. You want that week off.
Right. Plus, that's also a Friday game against them. So you would prefer not to have to play them But
so I think they will push extremely hard to find an opponent next Saturday, whether it's maybe you play another ACC school, maybe you don't count it as an ACC game. You don't know.
Right.
But, I think that's the more better option for this team because, if you don't play, you're kind of back almost like if you're in preseason camp again. You're kind of just going through the motions, and you got to ramp it up the week that you'll play at Boston College. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think they will be proactive in trying to find a formidable opponent.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right on that. I would not be shocked if there is some news released on that here probably today or even tomorrow. But we'll just have to wait and see where Carolina goes with that. The good news is that as of right now, it appears all of our guys are doing what they need to do. We're not saying that Charlotte wasn't. It seems like, it's only one guy, so you never really know what's going to happen. But Carolina is taking care of what they need to take care of out of the gate. So, of course, I'm going to write an article about that a little more in depth, maybe look at some of the teams that have open weeks coming up, teams that Carolina could potentially approach. If not, next week will be a little strange because we're not going to have a game to recap. We're not going to have a game to preview, but we'll still be covering some of the news that's going on. I know we're very interested to see when Joshua Ezeudu is going to come back. Mac Brown said after the game on Saturday he doesn't believe that it's a long-term injury. I think the plan probably was for him to just wait until they played Boston College.
Right.
I'd be very shocked if they were going to roll him out there against Charlotte, a team that you would feel like you could probably rest him against. But we'll see how healthy this team is if they can get him back. No other really concerning injuries. There were a couple other guys that were out of the lineup for the game on Saturday, but I think Carolina is looking to be in pretty good shape. It's just now let's see how their mental toughness is tested here with them having to get back on the field after 3 weeks of pretty much being outside of game preparation.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. So, the mental aspect of the game, they're going to get challenged again if they don't find an opponent for the 20 or for the 26, because you're going to have to just juggle having almost 3 weeks off. How do you stay mentally sharp, fit, and avoid being a college student and trying to get COVID-19? So.
Yeah, well, the good news is like you said, they're kind of locked down in their own bubble. They're kind of doing their own thing, so you got to really hand that to the staff. So that is going to do it for this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. Again, we wish we were previewing a game. We wish we had some predictions for you, but whenever Carolina gets back on the field,
they will not lose this Saturday. So
you go.
That's all that matters.
Bold prediction.
Stay 1-0.
Bold prediction, man. Yeah. I think there's also a chance that they don't lose next Saturday too. So how about that? First 3 weeks of the season, we might not have to watch Carolina lose a game. Although as we said when we did our schedule breakdown, which you guys can go back and watch that a little more in depth, maybe skip over the part about Charlotte because now that doesn't really matter. We think they're going to win plenty of games this year. So we'll end up, coming on here each week, previewing the game that's coming up and recapping the game each week. Same thing on the website. Of course, if you guys want to go back, relive that game against Syracuse, which now you'll have a little bit more time to do, you guys can go do that. We have the Syracuse recap on the site. We have the Trench Report on the site. And we also have the Stock Report, really good insight on everything, a big focus on the offensive line in all three of those articles about the concerns with them. So make sure you guys go and check that out, as well as some other stuff that could be on the horizon recruiting-wise. As of right now, nothing set in stone yet, but we do have some guys that seem to be closing in on their commitments here sooner rather than later, some big-time targets. So, of course, we'll always have you covered with that. We encourage you to like and follow the Facebook page here so you don't miss any editions of the podcast. We're on video now. By the way, wanted to mention that I am not wearing the same shirt that I have been wearing.
Time.
Maybe, now I'm thinking that I have to wear that shirt each week, right? Because I jinxed the team by not wearing the shirt today, and they end up getting the game canceled on the way to me driving to the office. So now I may have to wear the same shirt the rest of the season.
I mean, I don't care what you wear. I mean, but we are wearing the same shorts today. This is a regular occurrence because we have a lot of the same wardrobe.
We almost exclusively have the same wardrobe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of scary actually, but the fact that this happens as often as it actually does,
we're twinning.
And we don't plan this. We literally, this is not, we're going to call each other up and say, hey, man, we're going to wear the navy blue shorts today or whatever. No, we literally just walk in and we're like, you've got to be kidding me. We are wearing the same thing again.
I just wear them because I feel like I look good in them. I feel like I look more appealing to the eye, so I'm more confident in these shorts.
If you look more appealing to the eye in a pair of gym shorts than a pair of khakis, that's probably a problem.
I mean, let's just say it defines certain areas of my body much better than other shorts.
And we're going to have to cut that out of the podcast. Holy. All right, so.
It highlights my legs.
See, this is why we've got to have Carolina football to talk about. We are talking about your bleached white man legs right now. That first of all, no one on camera can see.
You want me to pull them up?
No.
Yeah,
no,
I'm not that flexible.
We definitely need to end this edition of the podcast. Of course, you guys can watch each week here on the Facebook page. We encourage you guys, if you watch on the Facebook page, be interactive with us. We record this ahead of time, so we won't be, talking directly to you on the video, but we are watching normally. We'll, respond back to you if you have any questions. If you want to talk, about something just in general, please feel free to leave a comment down there below the video. We really encourage, we are really happy that you guys have been following along with us here these first few weeks that we've been on video. You guys did a great job. Want to apologize for last week. Had some technical difficulties, ended up having to kind of shift, put the preview out the morning of the game. This is, of course, going up a little bit earlier, so you guys can, get prepared. Now, again, there's no game this week, but whenever we do these going forward, they will be up Fridays, maybe even sometimes late Thursday nights, so you guys can go ahead and check them out as opposed to Saturday and actually, no video, really just the wave lines on the screen. But we hope you guys still enjoyed that. For all of you guys listening on the Spreaker platform, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, any of those podcasting sites, we are really thankful for you guys as well. You guys have been with us since the beginning, so we encourage you guys to, of course, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so that people that haven't been with us since the beginning can track down the podcast, get all these great episodes, hear everything that we have to say, and we are really grateful for all of you guys who have watched and listened over these past couple of weeks. The last thing I'll say before we get out of here, to anyone that is in the way of Hurricane Sally, we hope and pray that you are doing well during this time. Stay safe. Make sure that you do everything that your local officials are telling you to do so that you can stay safe and continue to support Tar Heel football and everything around it. But for right now, we'll say so long. And as always, go Tar Heels!